Imagine yourself waking slowly inside a quiet wooden room, the kind where shadows flicker softly against grainy walls, lit by a lone oil lantern. The air is cool and still, tinged with the faint scent of cypress wood and damp earth. Outside, the world is yet to fully wake, but for some, the day has long begun. The hour is before sunrise. Not a bird sings, not a breeze stirs. Yet across Japan, in the folds of mountain valleys and behind the fortified walls of feudal estates, men are already dressed in layered robes, tightening the cords around their armor with practiced hands. They are not soldiers in the ordinary sense. They are samurai, the warrior class, a centuries-old order governed by discipline, duty, and an unyielding code of honor. But honor, as we will come to see, is not a life of grandeur. Beneath the lacquered armor and the polished steel lies a world of quiet hardship, of silence that weighs heavy, and of routine so strict that even the night offers no true rest. In this story, we will drift softly through the unseen side of samurai life, not with the clash of swords or the roar of war, but with the muted steps of weary feet and the rustling of straw mats in a cold, wooden barracks. We will begin with the exhausting nights in a samurai barracks, then followed the tragic final path of Sago Takamori, often called the Last Samurai. We'll wander into the lingering spirits of the 47 Ronin, whose loyalty became legend, and finally, we will take a quiet seat at the long, lacquered tables of a daimyo's palace, where even the smallest slip during a meal could shift the course of a man's future. So, breathe gently, let your body grow heavy, and your mind drift back in time. We are not in a rush. The pace of the past is slow, and there, in that quiet, the forgotten world of the samurai waits for us. Imagine a long, low building made entirely of wood. Its frame groans quietly when the wind moves across the eaves, and the smell inside is a mingling of oiled timber, dried straw, sweat, and faint ash from the evening's cooking fire. The floor is firm beneath your feet, polished by years of sandals brushing softly across it. This is not a place of comfort. It is a place of discipline. A samurai barracks, tucked within the high walls of a feudal estate. There are no private rooms here. No soft futons or cushioned beds, just a row of thin tatami mats, each one measured and spaced with meticulous care. Each mat marks the allotted space for one man to rest. Every sword lies within reach, carefully positioned to the left of its owner, edge facing inward, a habit trained into the body as much as into the mind. Even in sleep, a samurai must be prepared to rise and fight without delay. Night has fallen. Outside, the courtyards have grown quiet. The clatter of bamboo practice swords, the shouted kai of combat drills, all have faded into memory for the day. And now, the barracks are dim, lit only by a few flickering lanterns that hang from low beams overhead. Shadows stretch and sway like silent dancers across the walls. The men here lie on their backs, eyes closed or half open, breathing in a slow rhythm, their bodies stiff with the tension of recent exertion. But do not mistake this for rest. It is merely the pause between obligations. Their day began long before the sun rose, often by the toll of a wooden bell or the shout of a senior officer. They were pulled from slumber in the icy hours of dawn. No time to stretch or linger. Just rise, fold the bedding, don the uniform, and report for inspection. Boots aligned, belt straight, posture rigid. Then, without much ceremony, the morning drills begin. In winter, breath comes out in soft clouds. In summer, sweat forms before the first cut is drawn. Rows upon rows of men repeat their sword forms. Kata, again and again. Each movement is precise. A forward step, a turn of the wrist, a slice downward, a retreat. Dozens of repetitions, dozens of corrections. A single error, and the whole unit repeats the sequence from the beginning. This is not punishment in the harsh sense. It is reinforcement. The goal is not just to wield the sword well, but to become the sword. Motion without hesitation, judgment without thought. It is a form of meditation through labor. After drills come chores. Buckets of water must be drawn from the well. Firewood must be chopped and stacked. Armor polished. Floors swept. Stables cleaned, even by those who never ride. Every task has a purpose, and no one is exempt. Whether born to low samurai stock or elevated through service, the barracks do not care for lineage. They care only for precision, humility, and silence. Meals are brief and humble affairs. Breakfast is often rice, sometimes only barley, with pickled vegetables and broth, eaten cross-legged, in silence, under the watchful eye of a superior. Talking during meals is discouraged, unless prompted by a ranking officer. Table etiquette is strict. Bowls must be held properly, chopsticks aligned neatly, backs straight, and when the sun begins to lower itself behind the far hills, another round of drills begins. Dull wooden swords give way to real blades, drawn and sheathed in rapid succession as part of Iaido practice. The hiss of steel slipping through the air becomes a quiet chorus as dozens of men hone movements that may one day decide life or death. Only after the second round of duties, when the last of the armor is stored and the training courts raked smooth, does the barracks settle again into that strange, stiff stillness it knows so well. The men return to their tatami, fold their arms across their chests, and close their eyes. But not fully. Sleep, in this world, is never without caution. No one lies facing the entrance. That would be dishonorable, presumptuous. Instead, bodies lie parallel to the walls, side by side, heads toward the center. Those assigned to night watch rise quietly, collect their spears, and move along the outer corridor, eyes sharp for any motion, any light, any sound. The air grows colder in the early hours. The wooden walls do little to block the chill. A thin cotton blanket may cover the body, but it is not warmth that the samurai seeks. It is readiness, to be awakened by the clang of an alarm bell or the bark of a command, and to be standing in full gear within moments. That is the goal. This discipline seeps into the very breath of the samurai. They do not toss or turn. Movement is controlled, even in sleep. A misplaced foot, a loud snore, a failure to awaken at the proper signal. These things are not merely annoying. They are recorded, and in this world of constant ranking, where a man's place is determined as much by composure as by skill, they matter. The silence is broken only by the occasional crack of wood expanding in the cool night, or the soft shuffling of a patrolling guard's sandals. The barracks are never fully still. They breathed with the rhythm of restrained tension, a tension that, like the tight knot of a bowstring, is always held just shy of release. For the men who sleep here, honor is not a moment of glory. It is 1,000 unnoticed decisions made quietly. The way they rise, the way they bow, the way they fold their blanket, all of it is training, all of it is watched. And tomorrow, the day will begin again. As the night deepens, so too does the quiet inside the barracks. A place once filled with the sharp sounds of drills and commands, now hums with a different kind of energy, one that rests not in sound, but in the silent contract shared by every man within these walls. Even in sleep, they are bound by duty. In the far corner of the room, near the wooden beam that marks the entrance, a senior samurai shifts on his mat. His armor, though set aside, remains carefully stacked in the exact order of wear, underlayers folded, plates arranged, cords coiled precisely. It is not vanity, it is preparation. In the case of an emergency, he must be the first to rise, the first to lead, and he will be watched not only by subordinates, but by equals and rivals alike. The younger samurai, some barely more than boys, lie more rigidly than the older ones. They are still being shaped, their habits not yet settled into instinct. Their sleep is lighter, faces still marked by the effort of the day. Some carry bruises from training, unremarked, untreated, accepted. No one complains. That would be seen as weakness. And weakness, more than injury, invites reprimand. Not all those who sleep here are warriors in the strictest sense. Some are scribes trained in martial practice. Others are messengers or assistants to high-ranking officers. But all are subject to the same schedule, the same expectations. There is no room for softness. Even those who rarely hold a blade must behave as if they might be called upon to do so at any moment. The philosophy of readiness permeates every corner of life in the barracks. Even the structure itself reflects this. Doors slide silently, never slam. Lanterns are shaded, never glaring. Nothing is left to chance, not even the way light falls upon the floor. The rhythm of life here is one of constant vigilance, quiet but unrelenting. And yet, despite this severity, there is an odd comfort in the routine. The predictability of the day, the strictness of roles, the shared labor, these create a sense of belonging. The barracks is a home not of affection, but of recognition. Each man here knows his place. And in that certainty, there is a strange kind of peace. Sometimes, during the deepest part of the night, when the watch is silent and the lanterns burn low, the faint sound of a bamboo flute might be heard from a distant part of the compound, perhaps played by a guard stationed at the far gate, or a retainer in the daimyo's service. The notes drift lightly through the air, rising and falling like the breath of the building itself. Few speak of such moments. They are not recorded in ledgers, not mentioned in reports, but they remain, lingering in memory like the soft echo of footsteps in a corridor just left behind. Even here, in the tight world of discipline and duty, a trace of the human spirit seeps in. As dawn approaches, the light begins to change. The black of night gives way to a deep indigo, then to the softest grey. The air carries a new scent, of whetstone, of ash, of barley porridge warming in the kitchen fire. A crow calls, once from beyond the compound wall, its voice sharp against the otherwise muted atmosphere. Then comes the signal, a short, firm knock on the wooden post by the entrance, followed by a clear voice calling out the hour. One by one, the samurai stir. There is no groaning, no hesitation. Bedding is folded swiftly, garments adjusted. Within moments, the room is transformed from a hall of rest to a chamber of preparation. Some stretch silently, others check their swords. No one speaks unless necessary. The tone of the morning is serious, but not grim. It is simply what must be done. By the time the sun crests over the outer wall, every man is outside in formation. The courtyard is quiet except for the sound of footsteps aligning in order. The captain walks slowly past, eyes scanning for imperfections, a loosened knot, a tilted scabbard, a dull edge on a blade. Corrections are made without argument. Every detail matters. Every lapse has meaning. And yet, it is not cruelty that drives this routine. It is belief. Belief in the code that governs them, in the structure that binds them, in the legacy they carry forward. They are not merely training their body. They are upholding an idea, one that reaches beyond themselves, beyond their time. Inside the now empty barracks, the air remains still. The mats lie in quiet rows, as they did the night before, waiting for the return of tired feet. Another cycle has begun, and though each day is nearly identical, there is always the possibility, however small, that something will shift, that the call to arms will come, that the barracks will be emptied not for drills, but for war. Until that day, they wait, they train, they sleep in vigilance, and in their silence, they shape the very image of what it means to be a samurai. As days become weeks, and weeks pass into seasons, the rhythm of the barracks settles deeper into the bones of those who live within its walls. New recruits adapt slowly. At first, their hands are blistered from sword drills, their backs sore from kneeling too long, their minds restless from sleep that never quite sinks deep. But time and repetition wear down resistance like water against stone. The barracks, in this way, becomes a place of transformation. The boy who arrived in autumn with a satchel and wide eyes may, by spring, move with the same quiet confidence as those who have served for years. He will have learned not only how to fight, but how to wait, how to listen, how to remain still. Stillness, here, is more than physical. It is a kind of mental posture, a readiness without anxiety, a calm that does not seek comfort. In this life, comfort is fleeting. What endures is habit, and it is habit that keeps a samurai steady in battle, respectful in conversation, and composed even under the watchful eyes of lords and enemies alike. Evenings in the barracks are perhaps the most revealing. After the final meal, a modest bowl of rice, often with a piece of dried fish or simmered vegetable, the men gather briefly for communal duties. Ashes from the kitchen are carried out, floors are swept, water basins are refilled. These tasks are rarely assigned directly. They are expected. Each man steps into his role, not because he is told, but because it is his turn, or he notices a need. This quiet cooperation, this awareness of others, is part of the training too. Afterward, some men may sit in a corner to mend clothing or sharpen blades by the faint glow of a lantern. Their movements are slow, deliberate. Speech is minimal, perhaps a comment about the weather, or a quiet remark about the day's exercise, nothing more. Others prepare for inspection, checking that their belongings are arranged properly, that their uniform is clean and unwrinkled, that their sleeping mat is aligned precisely with the grain of the floorboards. These are not mere obsessions. In many ways, these details form the backbone of their identity. The samurai does not express his worth through luxury or ornament, but through order, simplicity, and discipline. There is also time, occasionally, for reflection. Some write letters, though few have family nearby. Others recite short poems, waka or haiku, composed during moments of stillness in the garden or on patrol. Poetry, despite its gentle nature, is not seen as frivolous. It is a mirror for the soul, a way to articulate the inner weight of duty, sorrow, and one might write of the cherry blossoms seen from the training yard, their petals scattering in the wind like thoughts unspoken, or of the sound of rain against the roof during a night watch, steady as a heartbeat, reminding him of the world beyond the barracks walls, a world he may never fully return to. As the final lanterns are dimmed, the room is bathed in darkness once again. Only the faint glow of the moon, slipping through narrow gaps in the wooden shutters, offers any light. The breath of sleeping men becomes a collective murmur, deep and steady. Outside, the wind rustles the pine trees. Occasionally, a senior officer may walk the perimeter, sandals brushing gently against gravel, checking for signs of disorder or signs of restlessness, but often he finds none. The barracks, at night, resembles a forest in winter, still on the surface, but quietly alive beneath. In this setting, sleep is not indulgent. It is preparation. Rest is taken not for pleasure, but for strength. To wake alert, to follow commands with precision, to make decisions in moments of danger. This is the reason for every hour spent on the There is also the unspoken truth that any night could be the last night of peace. The age of the samurai is one of shifting loyalties, sudden rebellions, and whispered plots. A barracks may be emptied by dawn, not for drills, but for battle. And so, the samurai sleeps, not to forget, but to remember. He remembers the code Bushido, not only as a list of virtues, but as a lived reality. Loyalty, courage, respect, integrity. These are not abstract words carved into stone. They are actions, repeated daily, down to the smallest gesture. Even the simple act of laying one's sword carefully beside the sleeping mat, or bowing to a superior before sleep, is part of this long ritual of belonging. It is an offering not to gods, but to a way of life that demands everything and promises nothing. And still, they choose it. Each man in this barracks has made a decision, either long ago or recently, to serve, to endure, to embody something greater than himself. Whether he is 17 or 45, whether his family lives nearby or far beyond the mountains, whether he will one day die in combat or live to train others, none of that matters here, in the quiet hours before dawn. What matters is presence. The way his hand rests gently near his blade, the way he exhales evenly, even in sleep, the way, when morning comes again, he will rise without complaint, ready once more to carry the weight of his name. There is something profoundly humbling about this life, a rhythm so strict, it reshapes the body and mind alike. In the barracks, time feels different. It is not measured in leisure or novelty, but in routines repeated endlessly. The folding of cloth, the sharpening of steel, the silence of shared meals, the breath held during inspection. And yet, in that repetition, a samurai becomes someone else, someone less concerned with self and more connected to structure, tradition, and purpose. The barracks do not merely house warriors, they refine them. They strip away unnecessary comforts and distractions until only what is essential remains. This is why, for many samurai, even the concept of home shifts, the barracks, with its creaking floors and strict regimen, becomes more familiar than the house of one's birth. Bonds formed here, through exhaustion and duty, can be stronger than blood. Men who train together, suffer together, and sleep side by side night after night, develop a trust that is nearly unspoken. They know how each other moves, how quickly one rises when called, how precise his stance during drills. They learn, through quiet observation, who hesitates, who perseveres, and who silently carries burdens too heavy for words. These silent understandings weave through the air like threads, invisible but binding. Of course, there are tensions too. Hierarchies are sharp, a glance held too long, a missed bow, an unsheathed sword pointed the wrong way. Any of these could lead to quiet reprimands, or worse. But even such tensions are contained within the discipline of the barracks. There is no shouting, no recklessness. Disputes are resolved through the channels dictated by custom and rank, and always, the code looms above them, not as a threat, but as a mirror. Bushido does not forgive easily. It asks for more than obedience. It asks for internalization. For a samurai, failing to uphold the values of the code is not only a stain on one's personal honor, but also on one's family, one's teacher, one's lord. In this world, identity is communal, and shame can spread like dye through cloth, slowly but irreversibly. This is why even sleep is sacred. The hours spent lying still, eyes closed, are not hours surrendered to idleness. They are watched. They are remembered. If a samurai is startled awake and responds poorly, fumbling for his blade, rising slowly, it becomes a mark, quiet but lasting. Word will travel. His readiness will be doubted. Such awareness shapes every moment, and over time, it becomes habit, then instinct, then something deeper, a way of being. A samurai learns not to prepare for moments of performance, but to live always as if such a moment could arrive at any second, even in the quiet dark of night. The result is a life of paradox, restful, yet restless, still, yet ever vigilant. In the barracks, every gesture, every breath, even the way one sleeps, must reflect the principles carved into the soul. Some samurai will spend years within such walls. Others will be summoned away by war, by orders, by duty elsewhere. Some will never return. And yet, no matter where they go, the barracks will live within them. The echo of wooden sandals in a corridor, the sharp click of a sword being tested, the faint scent of ash and iron and oil. These become part of memory and part of self. And when, in old age, a former samurai finds himself in quiet, perhaps retired to a village house with a view of rice fields or riverbanks, he may still wake at dawn without needing a bell. He may still place his sandals neatly by the door, fold his bedding with care, and keep his blade, now ceremonial, clean and close, not because someone is watching, but because the barracks taught him that someone always could be. So when we imagine the samurai, their faces stern, their armor gleaming, their swords swift and exact, let us not forget this quieter truth, that behind every moment of strength lies 1,000 small disciplines, repeated daily, most unseen. That, beneath the surface of ceremony and power lies fatigue, and a kind of devotion that asks for everything, and gives back only a steady, quiet pride, a pride born not from victory, but from constancy. And thus the barracks sleep again, another night, another cycle. The men lie still in rows, like brushstrokes across a scroll, their swords beside them, their breaths deep. The room, once filled with motion, now breathes in the rhythm of dreams, dreams that are never truly free, but always tethered to the weight of duty. This is what it means to sleep in a samurai barracks. It begins not with a charge, but with quiet discontent. The year is 1877, and Japan is no longer the nation it once was. Steamships have begun to replace the silent grace of sailing vessels. Western suits now appear alongside the flowing robes of tradition, and the sword, once the soul of the samurai, is being slowly retired in favor of rifles and bureaucracy. In the southern reaches of Kyushu, in the ancient province of Satsuma, a man named Sago Takamori watches these changes with increasing discomfort. He is no ordinary samurai. Broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, and revered by many, he had once helped lead the very revolution that now seems to erase everything he held dear. To understand the end of Sago's journey, we must first return to his beginnings. Born in the year 1820, Sago came from humble roots, the son of a lower-ranking samurai. Life in the domain of Satsuma was strict, even by samurai standards. Education was harsh, loyalty to the clan absolute, and poverty common. But Sago was earnest, intelligent, and deeply principled. He rose through the ranks, not by pedigree, but by perseverance. In time, he would become trusted by the powerful daimyo Shimazu Nariakira, a forward-thinking lord, who believed that Japan must modernize to survive. Under his guidance, Sago was sent on missions, served in government affairs, and began to learn the complex balance between tradition and reform. But it was not an easy path. Political intrigue, exile, and personal tragedy marked Sago's early years. He was exiled twice, once to the isolated Amami Islands, where he lived simply and quietly among the islanders, tending to gardens and forming deep bonds with the locals. During this time, his love of nature and poetry grew, and he became known for his humility and warmth. And yet, when called again to serve, he did not hesitate. By the 1860s, Japan was at a turning point. The Tokugawa shogunate, which had ruled for over 2 centuries, was weakening. The emperor, longer figurehead, was being revived as a symbol of national unity. Sago, along with fellow reformers from Satsuma and Choshu, became one of the architects of the Meiji Restoration, the movement that would dissolve the shogunate and return political power to the emperor. It was a time of upheaval, but also of hope. Sago believed that Japan could emerge stronger, rooted in its past, but open to learning from the world. He became a national hero, not for conquest, but for his sense of justice and unwavering dignity. And then, something changed. The Meiji government, which Sago helped bring into being, began moving swiftly. Too swiftly, perhaps. Western advisors were hired in droves. The samurai class, once respected and feared, was increasingly sidelined. Their stipends were cut, their swords banned from public, their schools closed. For many samurai, this felt like a betrayal. They had fought and sacrificed in the name of a better Japan, and now they were being discarded like relics of a forgotten time. Sago, too, grew troubled. He resigned from government in 1873, in quiet protest of the direction the country was taking. He returned to Satsuma, not in anger, but in sorrow. There, he opened schools for young men, institutions not only of martial training, but of moral education. These were not calls to rebellion, but to principle, and yet something stirred. His presence alone, respected, magnetic, incorruptible, began to draw followers. Disillusioned former samurai came to study with him. They admired his integrity, his modest life, his refusal to accept honors he did not feel were deserved. To them, he embodied the samurai ideal, one that the government seemed determined to erase. Soon, the government grew uneasy. Satsuma became a region of tension. Weapons were confiscated. Accusations of sedition rose. In response, the people around Saigo began to speak more boldly. Whispers turned to speeches. Frustration turned to preparation. And still, Sago remained composed. He did not shout. He did not issue proclamations. But neither did he retreat. By early 1877, it was clear that conflict could no longer be avoided. A force of former samurai, now numbering in the thousands, began to assemble under Sago's name. They wore the armor of old. They carried swords polished for war. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for a world they believed was vanishing. And Sago Takamori, the quiet warrior poet, who had once helped shape a new Japan, now found himself at the head of a rebellion. The men who followed Sago were not wild or reckless. They were former retainers, warriors trained in restraint, ceremony, and hierarchy. Many had once served noble families or regional lords. Now they sharpened their swords in silence, wrapped their armor with careful hands, and bowed before their former general. Not with the eagerness of ambition, but with the solemn weight of finality. They called themselves the Satsuma Rebellion. Their purpose was not to overthrow the emperor, for they still revered him. Rather, they wished to confront the government that now surrounded him, officials whom they viewed as corrupt, arrogant, and divorced from the heart of the Japanese spirit. Their fight was not for land, but for dignity. The government, however, saw the threat clearly. It could not afford a symbol like Sago, beloved across the nation, respected by even those in power, to stand against its reforms. And so, a modern army was assembled. Conscripts, many of them peasants, now wore Western uniforms and carried rifles. Officers trained in European tactics prepared to meet the rebels. It was the new Japan facing the old, not in theory, but on the battlefield. In February of 1877, the rebel forces began their march toward Kumamoto Castle, a stronghold in Kyushu held by the Imperial Army. The weather was cold and wet. Mud clung to boots. Supplies were limited, and yet spirits remained firm. Many believed that the people of Kumamoto would open the gates to Sago, that the garrison might even join him, but they were wrong. The castle held firm, the garrison resisted, and so began the long siege. Sago did not attack blindly. He ordered entrenchments, supply lines, and discipline. For weeks, the rebels waited, hoping for a break, either within the castle walls or in the form of reinforcements from sympathizers. But as the days passed, the imperial government sent its own reinforcements, better equipped, better supplied, and relentless. The siege dragged on, and morale began to slip. Food ran low. Rain soaked the camps. Ammunition was scarce, and gradually, the rebels began to retreat. They did not scatter in chaos. They moved with order, guarding their wounded, carrying their banners. But they were outmatched, not in will, but in numbers and firepower. Seigo, even as defeat loomed, remained calm. He refused to flee the island. He wrote poetry in the evenings, tended to the injured, and spoke to his men not with fury, but with sorrow. His face grew thinner, his gait slower, but his dignity never faltered. One soldier later recalled that Seigo walked among the campfires each night, nodding gently to the young men, asking them if they had eaten, if they had dry clothes, if their spirits were sound. He did not raise his voice. He did not boast. He simply listened. The battles that followed were scattered across the hills of southern Kyushu, in valleys and forests, along rivers and ridges. At Tabaruzaka the fighting was brutal. Rifle fire echoed through the rain and fog. Swords clashed in close quarters when ammunition ran out. The ground was thick with mud and smoke, and still the rebels held for days. But slowly, inevitably, they were pushed back. By August, the rebel army was in tatters. Their numbers, once 20,000, had dwindled to a few hundred. Starvation had taken its toll. Wounds had gone untreated, yet they continued to follow Seigo, not because they expected victory, but because they refused to surrender the idea he represented. Now hunted, they retreated to the hills near Shirayama, a steep, wooded rise overlooking the city of Kagoshima. There, Seigo and his final followers dug shallow trenches, reinforced earthen walls, and prepared for the inevitable. It was not a fortress. It was a farewell. The imperial army surrounded them, more than 10 times their number. Artillery was dragged up the slopes. Gatling guns were positioned. The end was not in question, only the manner of it. And through it all, Seigo remained serene. He wrote a final letter to the government, still refusing to curse the emperor. He spoke with his closest companions. He looked out across the sea, toward the horizon, where the morning sun would rise again, regardless of the outcome. There was no anger in him, only resolve. The night before the final assault was quiet. Those who remained at Shirayama, a few hundred samurai, weathered and worn, sat together beneath pine trees and makeshift lintus. Some shared stories, softly and without pretense. Others tended to their blades, checking for nicks and polishing with cloth worn thin from months of use. Seigo moved among them slowly. He did not issue long speeches or rallying cries. There was no ceremony, no stirring farewell. But he offered small words of comfort, a hand on a shoulder, a glance of recognition, a quiet, "You have done well." It was enough. At dawn, the silence broke. A thunderous roar echoed through the mountains as imperial artillery opened fire. Shells rained down on the rebel camp. Trees splintered. Earth trembled. Smoke rose in thick waves. The hills of Shirayama, once a peaceful overlook, became a cauldron of fire and steel. And yet, the rebels did not flee. They moved with quiet determination. Some charged down the slopes with blades drawn, seeking close quarters before bullets could find them. Others held ground in trenches, firing what little ammunition they had left. When the powder ran out, they drew swords. There was no illusion of victory, only resolve. Seigo Takamori, wounded in the leg early in the fighting, was helped by a close friend but put to a quiet spot beneath a tree, shielded from the worst of the fire. Blooded and pale, he remained composed. According to some accounts, he requested to be left alone, to face the end with dignity. There are varying accounts of how Seigo's life ended. Some say he took his own life in the traditional samurai manner, seppuku, assisted by his companion. Others suggest he simply succumbed to his wounds. The truth may lie somewhere in between, veiled by the fog of battle and the reverence of those who survived him. But what is certain is this: he did not flee. He did not surrender. By mid-morning the battle was over. The few remaining rebels had fallen. The hill was silent once more. Only scattered bodies, broken blades, and scorched earth remained as evidence of what had taken place. Imperial soldiers moved carefully among the fallen, checking for survivors. They found Seigo's body, lifeless but undisturbed, his features still calm. Word of his death spread quickly, and though the rebellion had failed, his final act left a mark far deeper than any victory could have. Across Japan, the reaction was mixed. Government officials declared the rebellion crushed, the samurai era decisively closed. But among the people, especially in the countryside, Seigo's name was spoken with reverence. His death was not seen as a defeat, but as a final protest, a last gesture of honor in a world moving too quickly for its own traditions. In the years that followed, a strange transformation took place. The very government that had fought him began to honor him. Statues were raised, stories were written, and the man who had once stood against the state became a symbol of its noblest ideals. How could such a reversal occur? Because Seigo represented something that Japan, even in its modernizing fervor, could not forget: the quiet strength of the old ways, the moral clarity of a man who chose death over dishonor, and the idea that change, to be meaningful, must remain rooted in integrity. He was not a man of ambition, he was a man of principle. And that principle, that sense of personal duty, of loyalty to one's conscience, even above orders, echoed far beyond the battlefield. It touched poets, scholars, politicians, and soldiers, even emperors. The samurai class would never rise again. Their swords would be banned, their stipends ended, their roles absorbed by the modern state. But the spirit they carried, sharpened over centuries, sealed by sacrifice, remained. And in that spirit, Seigo Takamori endures. Years passed. The Meiji era, now firmly in place, advanced with startling speed. Railways stretched across once remote provinces. Telegraph lines crackled with news. Silk factories and smokestacks rose where rice paddies once stood undisturbed. Japan, reborn as a modern state, stepped boldly into the world stage, its feet planted in industry, its gaze fixed on empire. And yet, in quiet corners, in family altars, in schoolbooks and whispered prayers, the name Seigo Takamori remained, not as a rebel, not as a failure, but as Nanshu, his pen name, the quiet warrior who lived and died by his own unshakable sense of right. In 1889, just 12 years after his death at Shiroyama, the government, the very one he had fought, issued a formal pardon. His name was cleared, his legacy restored. A bronze statue was erected in Tokyo's Ueno Park, showing him not in armor, nor on horseback, but in a simple kimono, walking his dog. There is something deliberate in that choice. No sword raised, no battle posture, just a man broad-faced, thoughtful mid-stride, as if pausing in conversation. Visitors to the statue often bow slightly, almost without realizing it. School children eat lunch beneath the cherry blossoms nearby, unaware at first of his story. But eventually, they learn, and when they do, it is not a tale of war that stays with them, but one of character. Seigo's true power was never in commanding armies. It was in restraint, in resignation, in his willingness to walk away from titles, wealth, and power when he felt they had strayed from justice. His home in Kagoshima, rebuilt as a museum, remains modest. A few artifacts, some scrolls, a collection of his letters and poems. His calligraphy is simple, strong. His favorite themes, loyalty, humility, and one passage, penned during his years of exile, reads, "To live rightly is better than to live long. To die with dignity is to live forever." These were not idle words. They shaped the very end of his life. Today, we live in a world distant from his, in time, in form, in rhythm, but there is a quiet thread that still connects us, the notion that there is value in integrity, even when the world moves past it. That strength is not only measured by force, but by what one is willing to endure or relinquish for what is right. As we look back on Seigo's final stand, let us not see only a battle lost. Let us see a man who chose to walk the harder path, knowing where it would end, but choosing it nonetheless. For duty, for honor, and for peace within himself. He did not rage against history. He bowed to it, but only after leaving behind something that could not be erased. The wind is cold in Edo. Snow drapes gently across the tiled rooftops of the city. Footsteps are muffled by the white hush that has fallen over the capital. It is the 14th day of the 12th month in the year 1703, and something unusual is happening at the gates of a grand estate in the district of Hon. 47 men, dressed in plain robes and moving with solemn purpose, kneel one by one. Their swords up, their faces are calm. They present the severed head of a man, Kira Yoshinaka, to the grave of their former master, Asano Na. There is no shouting, no triumph, only snow, breath, and silence. This is not the beginning of the story, nor is it quite the end, but it is the moment that would echo through Japan for centuries to come. The tale of the 47 Ronin, masterless samurai, is one of the most enduring in Japanese history, told and retold in plays, scrolls, poems, and films. It exists in the delicate space between fact and myth, history and legend. And yet, at its heart, it is a human story, one of duty, patience, sacrifice, and the invisible weight of honor. Let us return to the beginning. In the year 1701, the Tokugawa shogunate ruled Japan with a firm and ordered hand. Peace had prevailed for generations, but it was a peace of hierarchy and control. At the heart of this system was ritual, ceremonies, obligations, and a tightly woven web of etiquette. Asano Naganori, the young daimyo of the Oko domain, was called to Edo to fulfill a ceremonial duty. He was to assist in the reception of envoys from the imperial court. Though the task was largely symbolic, it was of great importance. For such occasions, even the smallest breach of protocol could result in disgrace. To prepare, Asano was placed under the instruction of Kira, a senior court official known for his mastery of ceremony and his reputation for arrogance. Accounts vary, but the records suggest that Kira expected generous gifts from Asano in exchange for his guidance. Gifts which Asano, upright and perhaps naive, refused to offer. Tensions rose quietly. Kira, insulted by Asano's frugality or indifference, is said to have mocked him, scorned his manners, and provoked him relentlessly. Asano endured the humiliation for a time, but on the 21st day of the third month, something broke. In the corridors of Edo Castle, Asano drew his sword, a serious breach in a place where violence was strictly forbidden, and wounded Kira. Kira survived. Asano was immediately arrested. The punishment was swift and final. Asano was ordered to commit seppuku ritual suicide. That very day, his lands were confiscated, his family named as his retainers, now ronin, samurai without a master, were disbanded. There was no trial, no inquiry, only silence and ruin. Most ronin faded into obscurity, taking up trade or wandering the countryside. But among them was Oishi Kuranesoke, Asano's chief retainer, a man known for his calm and thoughtful nature. Quietly, patiently, he gathered the scattered men, not with loud vows or dramatic speeches, but with careful words and gentle resolve. They would wait, not for days, not for weeks, but for nearly 2 years. For nearly 2 full years, the ronin disappeared into the fabric of everyday life. They scattered across cities and villages. Some took up menial jobs, as merchants, carpenters, servants, and monks. Others wandered the roads, changing names and appearances. They married, drank, pretended to abandon their old elite. Oishi himself was seen in Kyoto, frequenting tea-houses and seemingly falling into disgrace, drunk and disheveled, a man who had lost all sense of duty. But this, too, was performance. The men were not lost. They were waiting for the right moment, not one of opportunity, but of moral readiness. For in their minds, this was not an act of revenge, but of loyalty. They had no interest in rage. They did not seek chaos. They waited because the code they followed demanded it: patience, discipline, and complete certainty. The delay served a purpose. Had they struck too soon, the attack would have been seen as rebellion. But after time passed, after their lives had taken on the appearance of ordinary defeat, the world stopped watching. And that was when they returned. In the deep cold of winter, in the quietest hours of the night, they gathered in Edo, now 47 in number. Each man carried weapons that had been kept hidden for months, their blades wrapped carefully in cloth. They wore dark robes, reinforced with concealed armor beneath. Their plan had been drawn with care, not to create spectacle, but to restore dignity. Their target was Kira Yoshinaka, who had returned to his home under heavy guard, fearing an eventual attack. For months, his estate was fortified, but time bred complacency. On the night of the attack, the guards were fewer. The estate was still, wrapped in snow. The ronin split into 2 groups, one at the front gate, one at the rear. They moved silently, communicating with hand signals and hushed commands. They carried a drum, not for noise, but to signal the beginning of the assault. It would beat once, and the house would be breached. At the sound, they moved. Doors were broken, lanterns lit, not in chaos, but with precision. Guards were subdued, rooms cleared one by one. No servant was harmed, no wife or child touched. The ronin asked each person their name, searching room by room, until at last they found Kira, hidden in a storage shed behind the house. The final moments were quiet. Kira, disheveled and terrified, offered no resistance. The Ronin offered him the chance to die with honor. To commit seppuku, he could not, and so they carried out the sentence themselves. His head was taken, not for display, but for offering. They marched through Ido in silence, 47 figures in the early morning snow, carrying the severed head of Kira Yoshinaka, not as a trophy, but as a sacred burden. When they reached Sangakuji Temple, where their master Asano lay buried, they washed the head carefully, offered incense, and laid it beside the grave. Then they waited once more. They did not flee. They did not disguise themselves. They sat quietly at the temple, prepared for the consequences. And the people, watching them, hearing the tale unfold, were divided. Some saw them as criminals, others as heroes, but all agreed they had done something rare, something deeply Japanese. They had chosen death to preserve meaning. They had stepped outside the boundaries of law to fulfill the demands of loyalty. And in so doing, they reopened a question that remains: what is justice and what is honor? The shogunate deliberated. To let the men live would set a precedent that private revenge could replace official law, but to execute them would risk public outrage, for they had behaved with discipline, restraint, and a clarity of purpose that resonated deeply. And so, after much consideration, the decision was made. They would be allowed to die as samurai. The sentence was not delivered in haste. It arrived with deliberate silence, its finality cloaked in the formality of the era. The shogunate, though bound by law, seemed to understand that it was not judging ordinary men. It was weighing spirits, and even in condemnation, it could not entirely dismiss the purity of what the 47 had done. They would be allowed to die with honor, not by the sword of an executioner, but by their own hand, in the samurai tradition of To the people of Edo, the decision brought a strange mixture of relief and reverence. There would be no public spectacle, no drawn-out trials or humiliating punishments, but nor would there be mercy. The state would maintain its laws, the men would maintain their dignity, and history would find its own place between the two. In the chambers where they awaited their fate, the Ronin prepared not with dread, but with quiet acceptance. They bathed, combed their hair, dressed in fresh white robes. Some wrote letters, to family, to friends, to children they would not see grow. Others composed poems, as tradition allowed, offering last reflections wrapped in metaphor and rhythm. Their leader, Oishi Kuranasuke, was said to be calm, even serene. He spent the final morning speaking gently to those around him, thanking them not with grand speeches, but with quiet nods and small words. He is believed to have written a verse, lost to time, but remembered for its tone, composed, reflective, and entirely without bitterness. For Oishi, this was not defeat, it was fulfillment. Each man was brought into a separate room. A straw mat, a small blade, a second, the kaishakunin, stood behind, often a trusted comrade who had trained for this moment. The act of seppuku was not merely death, but a declaration, a statement of responsibility, closure, and inner strength. There were no onlookers, no announcement to the public, no flourish, only the steady rhythm of men meeting their end with hands steady and spirits clear. Among them was a youth, only 16 years of age. His name was unknown to most, but his resolve was said to match the eldest. Beside him sat a companion twice his age, silent save for the final bow. When his time came, he moved with grace, as if the weight of the cause had lifted all fear from his limbs. Only one was spared, a young messenger who had been sent away before the attack. His duty had been to carry word of the plan to the Asano family, a mission of remembrance. Some say he begged to join the others in death, ashamed to survive. Others say he honored their memory by living quietly, never seeking fame, never profiting from the story he bore. And so, one by one, they passed from the world. When it was done, their bodies were interred at beside the grave of Lord Asano. The temple grounds, usually quiet, became a site of pilgrimage. Townspeople arrived in silence, laying incense, rice, and sake. Farmers came with tokens of respect. Samurai of other houses bowed deeply before the stones. Even passing foreigners, curious and unsure, paused with a sense that something meaningful had occurred. Their graves are simple, arranged in orderly rows, each with a name and a prayer. No monuments, no declarations of victory, only stone, moss, and the scent of pine needles in the wind. In the years that followed, the story grew. It was adapted for the stage in kabuki and bunraku, with masked actors moving in stylized grief. It was painted on scrolls, told in tea houses, passed from father to son. The tale found its way into the quiet corners of everyday life, into lullabies, letters, and winter gatherings. It was not always told the same way, but the heart of it endured. Writers debated the meaning. Was this justice? Was it loyalty? Was it madness? Some said the men had upheld the truest spirit of Bushido, loyalty unto death. Others argued they had broken the law, and that revering them blurred the line between justice and vengeance. Scholars in Kyoto clashed in polite essay. Elders in the countryside shook their heads and simply said they did what had to be done. But the people did not argue. They remembered. Year after year, visitors returned to sit. Some came with questions, others with quiet admiration. Still others came seeking strength, believing that by walking among the graves, they might borrow a little of that ancient resolve. Even now, in the cold months of December and January, offerings appear, cups of sake, small coins, folded cranes. Time has passed, but the story and the spirit within it remains near, because what these men offered was not an example to be copied, but a reminder to be considered, that there are moments when silence speaks, that patience can be stronger than fury, that discipline can outlast injustice, and that even in a world governed by law, there exists a place, just beyond the edge of the written code, where dignity and conscience still speak in a language no government can suppress. In the centuries that followed, the story of the 47 Ronin drifted quietly through the Japanese imagination like incense smoke in a cold temple. It moved without force, resting softly in the spaces between law and loyalty, between duty and legend. Their tale did not thunder through history. It settled into it, one snowflake at a time. These were not men who sought admiration. They sought only to fulfill what had been asked of them by a sense of obligation larger than themselves. And yet, precisely because of this humility, their story has endured longer than most. With the passing of each winter, their memory returns, not as ghosts to be feared, but as reminders, gentle, resolute, and unyielding, of the human capacity for stillness, for patience, and for devotion to principle. The temple at Sangakuji, where the remains were laid to rest beside Lord Asano's grave, still stands today. Its gates, modest in size, open to a courtyard shaded by pines. Stones lined the walkway, worn smooth by centuries of quiet footsteps. At the far edge lie the graves, 47 simple markers, each carved with a name, each bearing silent witness to a vow fulfilled. Visitors come quietly. They do not speak loudly. They bow, light incense, and pause in stillness. Some come from far across oceans, drawn by curiosity. Others come year after year, as part of a quiet ritual. Occasionally, an elderly man in simple clothes kneels before a single grave, murmuring words known only to him. At times, snow begins to fall, as it did on that morning in 1703, blanketing the stones in white silence. Schoolchildren are brought by teachers, clutching notebooks and rice balls, their voices hushed. Some bring letters, others origami. Some simply look, unsure of why the air feels heavier here, why the quiet seems to say so much. The tale has been told in many ways. In ancient woodblock prints, the Ronin stand tall, swords drawn, eyes burning with purpose. In kabuki plays, they move with slow precision, masked and robed, each gesture laden with meaning. In modern films, their story is dramatized, sometimes distorted, yet always circling back to the same truth, that they waited, that they planned, that they struck, not from hate, but from honor, and they died, not for glory, but for balance. Their story is not simple. It asks more than it answers. Was it justice or personal vengeance? Was there loyalty to a man or to a deeper ideal? Should the law bend to accommodate what feels morally right, or must it stand firm even when it offends the heart? Generations have struggled with these questions, and still no final answer comes. Perhaps that is why the tale endures. It speaks not because it resolves, but because it reflects. In that reflection, we see ourselves. In a world driven by haste, The Ronin teaches patience. In a time of shifting allegiance, and in an age where promises can be light as breath, they remind us what it means to make a vow and carry it all the way to the grave, without shouting, without needing to be seen. There is a small wooden stand near the temple's entrance where visitors can leave offerings, coins, sake, notes. On cold mornings, the surface glistens with frost. On humid days, it smells of old cedar. There is no one guarding it, only the quiet. If you stand near the graves long enough, a breeze might rise. It moves the pine branches overhead. The shadows shift. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell rings, and for a moment, it is as if time has folded, as if the footsteps of those 47 men can be heard again, not in the noise of boots, but in the weight of their silence. They did not ask to be remembered. They asked only to be faithful. And in the end, that faithfulness became memory, not etched in gold or shouted in triumph, but whispered, one life at a time, for more than 300 years. So if you find yourself walking through Edo's memory on a quiet winter morning, near the stone path of Sangakuji, pause for a while. Feel the weight of the air. Trace the names on the weathered markers with your eyes, and let the silence speak, not of tragedy, not even of heroism, but of something quieter, the echo of 47 men who waited, endured, and departed with dignity intact. Imagine yourself stepping barefoot across a corridor of polished wood, where every grain in the floor has been smoothed by generations of passing sandals. The flicker of Andan lanterns casts warm pools of light upon the tatami, their soft glow mingling with the scent of incense, subtle, resinous, never overwhelming. There is no clutter, no noise, only the hushed rhythm of fabric brushing floor and the distant trickle of a garden fountain beyond the paper screen. You are within the inner halls of a daimyo's palace, not a battlefield, but a stage of authority. The world here runs on form, not force. Power is quiet, and so is fear. Tonight, a formal banquet is to be held. It is a scene of elegance, but not leisure, a performance, but not artifice. The guests are not ordinary men. They are retainers, samurai, envoys, scholars, and sometimes those who have come to negotiate or to observe. They carry not only blades at their hips, but reputations on their shoulders. And the table, long and low, is not simply a place to eat. It is a mirror of the social order. At the head of the room, raised slightly upon a dais, sits a daimyo. His expression is unreadable, his robes understudded but of the finest weave. He may speak tonight, or he may not, but his presence shapes every movement in the room. No one dares arrive late. No one dares speak out of turn. The stakes of the evening are measured not in volume, but in subtlety. Servants enter in silence, bowing as they go. They carry trays of lacquered black, burnished red, and pale ceramic, each piece a miniature work of art. The food is placed before the guests, without words, without gesture. A shallow nod from a guest is enough to acknowledge the offering. No need for thanks. That too is written. That too has its place. What rests on the tray is not just a meal. It is a seasonal arrangement. A tiny dish of vinegared lotus root, cut into the shape of a wheel. A folded persimmon leaf, beneath which lies a grilled morsel of river fish. A cube of tamago, sweet egg, balanced with a pickled plum. Everything is measured. Color, proportion, placement. To eat here is not to satisfy hunger. It is to participate in a conversation without speaking. Chopsticks are lifted with two hands, never used to point, never stuck upright in rice, a gesture associated only with funeral rites. Sips of sake are small, and cups must be poured for one another, never for oneself. To reach too quickly is to show impatience. To leave food untouched is a subtle insult, and all the while, though no one says a word, everyone is listening, not to sound, but to behavior. The slight pause before a bite, the glance to the host, the angle of the bow, the cadence of breath, all are signals, all are read, because beneath this serenity lies calculation, not cruel, but constant. The daimyo is watching, perhaps not directly, but certainly through the eyes of his aides. The guest who takes the third refill of sake may be noted. The one who declines a dish too often may be marked as proud. A smile held too long, a laugh that rings too loudly. All are remembered. And for those seated further from the center, junior retainers, visiting scribes, this dinner is an examination. Their performance tonight may affect future postings. An ill-timed comment could delay promotion. A well-executed silence might secure favor. Even the conversation, when it begins, is an art. No one speaks of politics directly. The favored subjects are the weather, the shape of the moon, the poetry of a long-dead monk. But these are not idle musings. They are coded. A remark about the early arrival of plum blossoms might be an observation about haste. A reference to a river flowing in silence could be a veiled statement about restraint. In such an atmosphere, food and language become indistinguishable. Both are carefully prepared, beautifully presented, and easily misinterpreted if handled clumsily. Meanwhile, the servants, mostly unseen, continue their dance behind the scenes. In the kitchen, flames are stoked to just the right height. Soba noodles are boiled and strained at the exact moment. Bowls are wiped free of fingerprints. Hands are washed, not once, but again and again, not from dirt, but from respect. For to serve at this banquet is to be part of something larger. A single error, even one unnoticed by the guests, will be known by the staff, and that knowledge lingers. It is passed down, not as shame, but as a lesson. Precision matters, even when no one is looking. And so, the evening unfolds like a scroll unrolling, slowly, deliberately, filled with detail and unspoken meaning. Courses are served in waves, the scent of grilled chestnut, the temps of citrus, the steam rising from a clear broth. Between each dish, there is time to observe, to adjust, to think, and all the while, no one hurries. Because, in a daimyo's palace, even the act of eating is a matter of state. The air inside the hall is warm, but never stifling. Fresh pine from the inner courtyard filters in, mingling with the faint umami scent of steamed rice and dashi broth. Lamps burn gently with oil pressed from rapeseed, their glow soft enough to calm the senses, but bright enough to let every eye observe the intricacies of the table. And there, on those lacquered trays, are not meals but statements. A small dish of tofu, glazed lightly with miso, and topped with a petal of chrysanthemum, is not simply sustenance. It is a reflection on the season, a nod to autumn's slow departure. The faint bitterness of the garnish evokes the year's final harvest. Each item on the tray is crafted to engage not only the palate, but memory, sentiment, and social grace. To speak too soon of the food would be A guest may, after a polite pause, offer a quiet observation. The color of the turnip is especially gentle this year, or the balance of vinegar in the greens is like a mountain stream, sharp but fleeting. But these comments must be offered carefully, not as compliments, but as contemplations. To express delight is acceptable. To express preference is not. To do so might suggest one is accustomed to judging, or worse, indulging. The conversations begin to stretch a little, as the cups of sake begin their slow circuit through the room. But even here, there is a rhythm. To pour for another is an act of service. To be poured for and not notice is impolite. A slight nod, a hand lifted to stabilize the cup, these are the signals that maintain harmony. No word is spoken to request a refill. It is understood. Everything here is a dance of implications. And yet, beneath the formal quietude, tension remains. This banquet may serve as the final step in a negotiation that began months ago. Perhaps a marriage is being arranged, or a border dispute, long dormant, is being eased into resolution. Perhaps a visiting scholar has come to deliver a message, subtle in nature, from a distant domain. The food serves as both distraction and language. The silences are not empty, they are charged. At times, the daimyo may speak. When he does, it is often not to the whole room, but to one guest. A reflection on a poem, a faint smile at a seasonal proverb. He might mention the fishing in a nearby river, or ask about the quality of the early rice harvest. But each phrase is laden. If he praises a dish, it may be because he is truly pleased, or it may be because he is watching to see who agrees too quickly and who hesitates. Sometimes, the true meaning of a statement does not emerge until weeks later, when letters are exchanged, or consequences quietly unfold. The servants attending the meal were dark indigo or grey. Their sleeves are tucked, their steps featherlight. They carry dishes with both hands, heads lowered slightly. When one approaches a guest, another always observes from a distance, ready to assist should a tray falter or a question arise. The etiquette of serving is as intricate as the etiquette of being served. And just beyond the hall, behind screens of cedar and woven reed, the master of the kitchen listens. He is an older man, his face lined by decades of steam and fire, his robes spotless, his voice seldom raised. His role is not only to oversee preparation, but to anticipate, to adjust timing when conversation lingers, to delay a delicate soup if the hall has grown too warm. He walks barefoot on wooden floors, judging the readiness of a course, not by clock, but by intuition. He does not speak with the daimyo directly, but he knows his tastes, his preferences, his moods. If the lord prefers his rice a shade firmer on nights of rain, the kitchen adjusts. If the meal follows news of a military loss or an unexpected expense, the sweetness of the dessert may be reduced subtly, but meaningfully. This is not it is political equilibrium, maintained through broth and grain. And so, course by course, the evening unfolds. Guests take care not to finish too quickly, nor to leave too much. To clean the plate entirely is polite. Unless the portion is generous, then a small remainder may indicate satisfaction without greed. Each movement, from wiping the edge of a bowl to folding one's napkin cloth, speaks to one's upbringing, attentiveness, and respect. As the final dish approaches, usually something warm and delicate, a clear soup with herbs, or a steamed custard in a lacquered bowl, the mood of the room shifts subtly. Conversation slows, posture some glance toward the daimyo, others toward their immediate superior. The meal is ending, and with it, the window of impression. There is no applause, no announcement. The end of a daimyo's banquet is a whisper. Guests bow in unison, first to the host, then to one another. They speak only the formal phrases. It was an evening of deep gratitude. The flavor of the turnip reminded me of home. The silence of the garden was most welcome. Each phrase carefully chosen, each bow measured, and then, one by one, they rise. Their sandals are waiting at the threshold, placed with the tips facing outward, ready for departure. Servants guide them through gently lit hallways, past decorative alcoves, adorned with a single vase, a single scroll. Nothing is crowded, nothing is rushed, and yet everything is changed. Long after the guests have departed, the palace does not sleep. Within its quiet walls, the memory of the banquet lingers like smoke after a flame is gone. In the now empty great hall, servants move silently, collecting trays and bowls, brushing stray grains of rice into cloth, and folding away each piece of the performance. Nothing is discarded carelessly. Everything, even a sliver of leftover radish, is returned, recorded, and disposed of with quiet reverence. In the kitchens, low voices recount what went well, what must be noted, what must never be repeated. The placement of a tray half an inch too far, a cup returned with a small crack no one saw before serving, the slight delay between two courses, not enough for scandal, but enough to mark. Each observation is offered without blame, because here, discipline is never personal, it is inherited. The master cook retires only when every knife has been cleaned and every surface wiped twice. He moves through the kitchen once more, fingertips grazing the wooden counters like a calligrapher inspecting parchment. He says nothing. He nods once. Then he's gone, as silently as he arrived. Elsewhere in the palace, messengers prepare records. The names of all who attended are written with brush and ink. Their positions, their conduct, their remarks. Everything is noted, not in summary, but in precise language. These notes will be kept within the archives, where the daimyo's advisors can return to them if questions ever arise. Did that envoy from Izu bow more deeply than last season? Did the general speak too freely of troop movements while in this world, memory is not carried by feeling. It is organized, deliberate, and archived. Meanwhile, in private rooms far from the hall, the daimyo himself retires. Perhaps he has not eaten everything served. That is expected. His trays will be inspected by senior kitchen staff, not for suspicion, but for insight. Did he favor the duck over the trout? Did he sip the final soup or push it aside? These small choices are never just about taste. They may reflect mood, intention, or fatigue. Those closest to him understand that food, like power, is never simple. Within his chambers, the lighting is dimmed. A single brazier glows near the center, fed by slow-burning charcoal. The windows remain open, a finger's width, letting in the scent of night air and the sound of a distant water basin filling, then emptying, then filling again. It is this rhythm, this measured repetition that the palace seeks to preserve, even when the world outside grows louder. The next day, nothing will be said of the banquet aloud, but the ripple effects begin immediately. A guest may receive a letter, handwritten, thanking him for his presence and acknowledging his insight. The language will be formal and reserved, but the meaning will be unmistakable. He has made an impression. Another guest, by contrast, may receive no note at all. That, too, will be noted. Among the retainers, discussions take place in private. A comment made during the meal, one that, at the time, seemed innocuous, may now be Did the advisor from Tosa imply dissatisfaction with last month's tax census? Was the scholar's reference to the decay of discipline meant as critique or as literary metaphor? Such questions are not answered quickly. They are held, turned slowly like stones in the palm, considered from every side. In this world, meaning is often buried, and understanding it takes time. Patience is a virtue not only in behavior, but in interpretation. And then, gradually, the conversations settle. Orders are given. Some policies may shift. A travel invitation may be delayed. A junior official may be quietly promoted. Another may find himself reassigned to a quieter province. No explanations are given. None are needed. The banquet did its work, not through command, but through presence. What remains behind, in the physical world, are the smallest traces. A tiny ink stain on a guest list, a chipped edge on a serving tray, now set aside, a faint perfume clinging to the curtain where one noblewoman passed. And yet, these details matter little compared to what was unseen. The exchanges of glances, the silences measured in heartbeats, the bow held a moment longer than necessary. The palace remembers, not through drama, but through stillness. In this world, to eat at a daimyo's table is not to be it is to be weighed, and those who understand this do not leave such a room unchanged. They leave carrying more than a full stomach. They carry the knowledge that everything they did, every sip, every breath, became part of a ledger they will never see. Beyond the palace walls, the city breathes in a rhythm more familiar to the ordinary. Street vendors close their shutters, and the last flickers of lanterns mark the end of commerce. Fishermen sleep by their boats. Couriers deliver final letters under moonlight. But inside the inner court of the daimyo's residence, the air remains suspended, as if the weight of etiquette and the memory of the evening have not yet fully dissipated. Within the guest quarters, some visitors remain until morning. Those honored with rooms are treated to quiet comfort, not opulence, but serenity. The bedding is folded precisely. The tatami is newly brushed. A charcoal brazier burns slowly in the corner, and beside it, a single porcelain cup, already filled with water. No servant lingers. No words are spoken unless necessary. Even in rest, form remains. Guests do not rise as they please. They are awakened gently by the soft sound of a wooden gong, struck just once at the break of dawn. Outside, the palace garden is washed in morning mist. Light filters through slender pine branches and casts long, pale shadows over the raked gravel. Birds begin to stir. A koi breaks the surface of the pond, disturbing the perfect reflection of a stone lantern. In the breakfast room, much smaller, more intimate, bowls of rice, miso, and lightly pickled vegetables are served. There is no ceremony now, no performance, but the calm remains. Chopsticks move with the same grace. Tea is poured in silence. The lingering impressions from the night before hang in the air, like dew refusing to lift from the grass. When guests depart, they do so quietly, offering a final bow that mirrors their arrival. The palace attendants, still alert and precise, retrieve sandals, adjust robes, and guide the visitors down stone paths bordered by moss and trimmed hedges. Even farewells are structured, not by emotion, but by order. Outside the gates, rickshaws and escorts wait. Once past the last threshold, conversation returns, but it is tempered. No one laughs loudly. No one boasts of the dishes they tasted. Instead, they reflect, they whisper, they remember, and they consider what the evening might mean for the weeks to come. For those who live within the palace, the servants, stewards, cooks, and guards, the banquet is not a single event, but a cycle. Already, notes are being compiled for the next gathering. Inventory is reviewed. New vegetables are ordered in anticipation of the coming season. Scrolls listing the rituals of spring are unrolled and revised. In the heart of the inner compound, the rooms are aired and swept. Tatami mats are sun-dried and rotated. Decorative scrolls, chosen to reflect seasonal sentiments, are replaced. One bearing a verse on the stillness of snow is rolled away, exchanged for one depicting early plum blossoms, fragile against a grey sky. These changes may seem small, but they are not without meaning. Because within the world of a daimyo, nothing is random. The arrangement of flowers, the angle of a guest's seat, the sequence of dishes, all form a conversation more intricate than any spoken word. This is not the language of noise, but of arrangement, of balance, of the unspoken. It is through these choices that a daimyo expresses not only his taste, but his rule. In a time when armies rest and swords remain sheathed, it is through hospitality that authority is maintained. Each guest who departs having witnessed the harmony of the evening carries a fragment of that power with them, a subtle reminder that here, under this roof, order prevails. The palace, in this sense, is not merely a residence, it is a symbol, not of extravagance, but of control. And so, it continues. Another season, another gathering, another quiet reshaping of relationships through the simplicity of food and the complexity of form. When you next imagine feudal Japan, let your mind drift not to the battlefield, but to this quiet interior, a room filled with the aroma of cedar and broth, a space where words are few, yet every gesture speaks, a night when nothing appeared to happen, yet everything subtly shifted. And when you think of power, think also of grace, of how influence may be wielded with a soft voice and a steady hand, of how a single meal, arranged with precision, can shape the future just as surely as a drawn blade. In the hush of the palace, in the silence after the guests have gone, that truth remains, steady as a stone lantern beneath falling snow. You've walked tonight through the hush behind the legend, not the roar of the battlefield, nor the flash of the sword, but the quieter spaces, where duty lives not in victory, but in repetition, where the samurai sleeps with one hand always near the blade, where loyalty waits 2 long years to keep its vow, where a banquet can weigh more than a war. The world we visited was shaped by silence. It was a world of long corridors, bowed heads, and unspoken agreements. A world where honor was a lifelong companion, and every gesture, a bow, a sip, a pause before speaking, carried the weight of generations. In the barracks, we lay on tatami mats beside men who never truly rested. In the mountains of Shirayama, we stood behind Sago Takamori as he chose the dignity of ending over the dishonor of surrender. Among temple stones and falling snow, we followed the footsteps of the 47 Ronin, their promise sealed in silence. And under low ceilings and warm lanterns, we sat at the table of a daimyo, where a single misplaced glance could mean exile, and a perfectly folded napkin might mean promotion. All of these were moments of restraint, not of action, of endurance, not of speed. And now, as you lie in stillness, in your own room, your own time, that quiet may feel a little closer. The breath of the past, steady as yours, the rhythm of those long-ago nights echoing softly in the hush around you now. Let the weight of discipline give way to ease. Let the sound of distant footsteps fade behind the sliding door. Let the memory of firelight on rice paper walls become nothing but a warm flicker in the corner of your dreams. The sword has been sheathed, the guests have gone, the ink is dry, and somewhere beyond time, in the quiet that never ends, the samurai sleeps.